Hey everybody, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth.
On Now You Know. This week's show is sponsored by Policy Genius. What are you doing?
I'm getting frustrated. That's what I'm doing.
What's the problem?
Okay, I'm trying to find the best auto insurance policy for Sparky and Tess, and it's like I have to go to like dozens of auto insurance company websites and fill out an individual form on each one to get quotes emailed to me, but some don't email me back. Some call me on the phone. That's fun, getting phone calls from insurance companies, and then I have to fill out my spreadsheet and compare them, which seems impossible.
Okay, why aren't you using Policy Genius?
Well, I did use that for my life insurance like you suggested, and it was great.
But Policy Genius also handles auto insurance. In fact, it handles life, auto, disability, homeowners, renters insurance, and more.
But wait, so is Policy Genius an insurance company?
No, it's an insurance marketplace. In minutes, you can work out how much coverage you need and compare personalized quotes to find your best price.
So that's why it was so easy for Policy Genius to find me the best life insurance that ended up saving hundreds of dollars?
Right. Policy Genius's licensed experts work for you, not the insurance companies.
So I remember it didn't cost me anything when Policy Genius found my life insurance. Is it going to cost me anything to find the best auto insurance?
No, it's completely free. They have thousands of 5-star reviews and over 400 experts ready to help you if you have questions.
Wait, so if I have questions about like which policy is best, I can ask them?
Yeah, they have fully licensed insurance experts to help give you unbiased advice.
So help support our show and find the best insurance for you by using Policy Genius. Go to policygenius.com/nowyouknow.
And we're brought to you by abetterrouteplanner.com. Click the link in the description for a free trial to the premium app.
All right, finally, the Tesla shorts have been squeezed.
And we think that this has some broader implications about the Tesla, the company as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, for the longest time, Tesla stock has been heavily shorted. Remember, shorting a stock is when instead of buying a stock because you think its long-term prospects look good,
you borrow and sell a stock because you think it's overpriced, and then you buy back shares later when the share price drops. And we've been talking about Tesla being heavily shorted for years. So what's changed?
Well, take a look at this chart here. It shows Tesla's share price in white going up over the past few years.
Yep, I got that. But what's the blue line?
Okay, that is the percentage of Tesla stock being shorted. As you can see, even just a couple years ago, Tesla was one of the biggest shorted stocks on the market with about 20% shorted. And today?
Wow, it's down to like, what, 1%?
Yeah, as Bloomberg reports, the percentage of stock borrowed by traders, a standard measure of short interest, has slumped to 1.1% of Tesla's shares available for trading, according to IHS Markit Limited as of last Thursday. That's the lowest since 2010 when the carmaker went public. So this is really big news because for the longest time since we've been doing the show practically, I mean, there's been times when Tesla was shorted like 30%.
Right. And all of this was predicated on the idea that Tesla as a company would fail, that it would go to zero. And all these short sellers were coming out. They were doing a lot of publicity campaigns for shorting Tesla stock. And it was honestly like a melee of just like Tesla's going to zero, and then everyone who like knew anything about Tesla being like, no, I don't think it is. They're gonna go bankrupt, they're just burning money, blah 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 blah. And that never happened. And so after many quarters of profitability, have we finally shut the shorts up?
I think this is the end of an era, and we're going to explain why. But to a lot of people, this might be like, well, this is bad because there's no longer a short squeeze. And as you remember, a short squeeze is when there's so many shorts that as the stock price goes up, you've squeezed them. They now have to buy back their shares at a raised price, which then raises the price more, which then squeezes them more. So you might be like, oh, no, we don't have the short squeeze working for us anymore. But I think this is actually a good thing. And let's explain why.
Let's take a look at a company that you might have heard of. It's a little company called Amazon. And today, Amazon is considered a very strong company with a market cap of $1.6 trillion. But let's go back about 7 years.
Yeah, take a look at this chart showing short interest in orange and Amazon's stock price in blue. As you can see, starting in 2012, short interest in Amazon dropped as the market began to realize that Amazon was a leader in online retail. But also, let's remember that in 2011, that's when Amazon started including something called Prime Video as part of its Prime subscription. Now, if you go back to 2011, a lot of people didn't really think much of Prime Video. They're like, okay, so they bought a bunch of crappy movies, they put them on the streaming service, but like there's plenty of other streaming services. So what is Amazon doing here? I mean, they're an online retailer and they're getting into streaming.
Exactly. They hadn't produced any of their own original content. And so it was kind of like why are you guys getting into this thing? Like, you're doing the book thing. That was good. And now I guess you're selling other things. I mean, put your mind back to 2011. Buying stuff online was nowhere near as common as it was today.
Right. So a lot of investors thought, why aren't you focusing on your online retail business? Why are you now getting into Prime? And then also, why are you getting into this other thing called Amazon Web Services?
Right. Amazon's AWS, or Amazon Web Services, is pretty big section of Amazon's company today.
Right. It's a huge moneymaker. And again, at the time, it was like, why are you hosting web servers and stuff? Like, what does that have to do with online retail? But around 2012, as you can see again from this chart, a lot of people started to get it. Amazon was a huge leader. They weren't going away. And so short interest dropped in the stock. So then around 2016, short interest in Amazon was at an all-time low, and Amazon's share price was about $715 a share. Now, I want you to remember that number. All right, so earlier in the show, we said that we think this is the end of an era. I think this is the end of an era, and we're going to explain why. And that this isn't a bad thing. The end of the short squeeze is not bad. And what led to the end of this short squeeze? I mean, why is there now about 1% of the people shorting Tesla stock as opposed to back when it used to be 30%?
So I think first and foremost is profitability. Tesla has had about 2 years of steady profit, and their revenues have continually been going up. And so if you're looking at it from a fundamental point of view, you're going to see, well, it's pretty hard to make the argument that like suddenly Tesla's going to either stop making revenue or stop making profit. So it's a pretty hard argument to say that Tesla is no longer a company that's going to be doing well.
There's so many things that have gone in Tesla's favor here that we all thought was coming, but especially Tesla getting on the S&P 500 was a biggie. And the fact that quarter after quarter now, like you said, there's been profit, and it's hard to point to quarter after quarter of something and say that it's going to stop. Back a couple of years ago, it was easy to say, well, that's just a good quarter for them because they had some regulatory credit sales and that's going to dry up. But as each quarter goes on and Tesla keeps growing more cash, more revenue, more profit, it's harder and harder for the fudsters to say that this is going to end.
But of course, profit is just a resultant of a bunch of other really important things that have been going on at the company. I think one of the most important is Model Y. And because of the pandemic, Model Y has not gotten the attention that I think that it really deserves. When the Model 3 came out, made a lot of buzz because lots of people were going for test rides. That's not something that most people really want to be doing, is hopping in strangers' cars today. So the Model Y has been this underground success where people who were interested in the Model 3 but definitely wanted an SUV can now get into what is essentially a rip-roaring fun ride with great ranges, supercharger network, super efficient, easy to charge, all of those things that were great about the Model 3 in a bigger package.
And Model Y really dispelled a lot of FUD that had still been lingering with the Model 3. You remember when Model 3 was ramping up, Tesla was having a lot of production problems getting it to ramp properly. And so when Model Y came out, and it just came out in heavy volume right away, and there were no problems, I think that was a big indicator to people that Tesla had figured a whole bunch of stuff out.
And I think that another indicator of that success was Giga Shanghai.
Yeah.
The Model 3 ramp was very bumpy. The Model X ramp was way worse than that, and so was the Model S. So Tesla really hadn't had their act together, I think, until Model Y ramp. And they were able to take all the learnings that they made from the Model S, the Model X, and the Model 3, apply them directly to the Giga Shanghai factory. They were able to get production up and running really quickly. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go along. But now we're also thinking about Giga Texas and Giga Berlin, which of course are still being built. But when they come online, I think that there isn't as much worry that it's going to take a long time for volume production to happen.
I think when Giga Texas and Giga Berlin were announced, most investors didn't think of them as an actual positive. They thought, well, this is like any other company that announces we're going to build a factory someday. They didn't realize that it was going to happen so soon. And a lot of people thought, well, trying to build a factory in Berlin, that's going to go really slowly. But now when you look at those sites, and we're seeing them here, they look like factories. They don't look like just construction sites anymore.
And I think that the stock price today and the decreased short interest speaks to all of these positives that we've just been talking about. But I don't even think that this counts a lot of other things that Tesla is doing.
There's things like full self-driving. Tesla Insurance, Tesla Energy, including AutoBidder, Solar Roof, Megapacks, Powerwalls, VPPs, and then TeslaBot. I don't think any of those things are being counted into the stock price right now. I think all that's being thought about are the upcoming gigafactories and the fact that Tesla is now hitting an annual production rate of about 1 million cars a year. All right, so what lies ahead for Tesla's stock? Well, Dan Ives, who's a Wedbush analyst, just put a price target on Tesla of $1,000. But I want to go back to Amazon for a second. We talked about Amazon earlier, and I told you to remember its share price back in 2016. What was it?
$715.
Very good. You remembered it. Okay, so remember, that's when Amazon finally stopped being seriously shorted. At that time, you may have thought that that was a lot to pay for Amazon. I mean, its PE ratio in June of 2016 was a whopping 177x.
Now, for those of us who heard PE ratio and thought of gym class, can you explain what this means?
Price to earnings ratio. So basically the price of the stock related to the earnings of the company.
So 177 is a bad price to earnings ratio?
That's a really high one. It generally points to you think the company is going to keep growing if you're paying that much for the stock today because it's not making that much money based on its stock price. It's a very expensive stock. But now let's take a look at its share price today. Amazon's stock price today, as of the recording of this show, is $3,248 a share. That's up 354% or 4.5 times from just 5 years ago.
So how did that happen?
Well, this is because Amazon has turned from what looked like a cash-losing machine into a revenue-generating machine. So if we look back a few years ago, no one seemed to understand what Jeff Bezos was doing. He was plowing all of his earnings back into his business, not giving any of it to shareholders in the form of a dividend or anything. And a lot of people are like, what are you doing, Jeff? If you look at this chart here, revenue's going up, which is great, but profits are flat.
And so this turned off a lot of investors because if your revenues keep going up, you should be profitable. If you're running a business that's going to be making money, why aren't the profits going up?
Right. No one really understood where the money was going. They didn't quite understand Prime and AWS and the Whole Foods acquisition and many other things that he was doing with the money. Now, if we look at a more updated chart, we see that last year they had $21 billion in profit. We're starting to see that profit go up. And so a lot more investors are going, oh, I get it now. And so the stock price has gone up even further.
Because basically what Amazon had been doing was taking all of that, what would have been profit, and plowing it back into the company in terms of, research and development for other things and expansion. And so they were kind of accelerating their growth instead of just sort of taking profits early.
And that's what I want to get to next is return on invested capital. If you take your money and you invest it into something, well, let's take Tesla, for example. When they take their revenue and invest it back into capital, which in this case, let's think of factories, they can take that money and get a return on it. In this case, thanks to our buddy Mayor Thaker, or at Fresh Jiva, we see this chart of Tesla's return on invested capital over time. And today, currently, they get a return on invested capital of 23.9%. That means for every dollar they invest back in factories, they get $1.23 back.
Is that good?
That's really good. There's only a few companies that can get more than that, and especially only a few that can do that year after year. One of those companies is Apple. They're currently getting a return on invested capital of about 40%. So they invest $1, they get $1.40 back, which is why Apple is one of the most valuable companies on the planet. And Elon has commented on this recently in a tweet that Tesla's long-term competitive advantage is manufacturing technology, being able to be more efficient at making things by having super efficient machines that make the machines. In essence, super efficient factories.
And if you don't believe us, check out this awesome sleuthing by JPR007. Tesla has already paid off its $1.4 billion loan in China for the Gigafactory in Shanghai.
Yeah, I just want to stop there for a second. A lot of people, when they were building the factory, were like, where are they getting the money from? Oh, they're borrowing from Chinese banks, so that's some kind of trickery so that they can, they don't have to go to investors. And when are they going to be able to pay that back? Well, 16 months later, they've fully repaid the loan.
And it was repaid using revenue generated by that factory, all while it was still undergoing expansion and construction.
Yeah, I mean, Tesla's making the leading EVs in the world, and they're able to turn a profit on a factory in a foreign country in less time than it takes for most other car companies to decide how many billions they're going to pour into existing facilities by 2030 to make EVs which barely compete with the 3 or the Y.
It's pretty astounding that they were able to take what was a muddy watermelon field in Shanghai and turn it into one of the leading EV manufacturing facilities in the world.
Especially since it's in a foreign country. I mean, Tesla is headquartered in Palo Alto, California. They had to then go to China, work through all of that government stuff, work through all the construction stuff, open a factory, and then switch from 80% of their supplies coming from outside the country to then now 80% of their supplies come from inside the country, all doing that in record time. Like no one's ever seen that happen before at that speed. It's absolutely incredible. And then now to be able to report that they've paid off the factory.
Exactly. Conventional wisdom would have told you that Tesla would not be able to accomplish any of this, that they would have had to partner with the Chinese company, which would have essentially meant that they would be cutting their profits in half from that endeavor in China. Tesla was able to open a fully owned factory in China, something that no other car company has done, that, other than Chinese car manufacturers. That's insane. Then you go to, okay, they built the factory and paid it off in 16 months from when they actually acquired the loans. That's unbelievable. The implication of what they can do now is that building a factory is not the barrier to entry that it is to most companies,
right?
Because they're able to just turn it around in a record time.
And I just want to take one more look at this chart here of Tesla's return on invested capital. So you see that line there in the middle? That's zero. When this chart started is not like back in 1900. This chart started in 2015. Mm-hmm. Back in 2015, when they invested capital, they actually lost money on it. Why? Because they weren't efficiently using that capital yet. But then, over the course of just the length of this show, they've gone from being negative to being extremely positive. And look at that trend line. Where's that headed?
It's headed up. That's basically the only direction it's headed is up. And they can decide to tweak that number. They have breathing room to say, oh, let's pour some more money into something that'll take longer. Like maybe, battery technology or something that'll pay dividends much later down the line that wouldn't necessarily be represented by this graph.
Exactly. Now, did Elon stumble at times in his quest for this super efficient machine?
Yes. He admitted recently to everyday astronaut Tim Dowd that he actually got the order wrong of his 5-step process, basically the 5 principles for engineering efficiency.
Yeah, for example, when Tesla was making their battery packs, he admitted that Tesla was spending millions of dollars on a section of the line that puts these fiberglass mats on the battery packs, and then the robots couldn't do it, remember? And so he went back to having humans do it, and then he realized he didn't need that step at all, and that he had just wasted time and money on something that wasn't even necessary. He asked one engineering team, like, what are these mats for? And they're like, it's for sound. And then he asked another team, like, what are they for? It's for safety. And he was like, wait, neither of you know why you need the mat, and they got rid of it. So he learned along the way.
And we all remember that when the Model 3 was ramping up production, there were a lot of stumbles as Tesla tried to increase the production rate. But they had installed too many robots, or they packed them too closely together, and it took a while before they figured out how to produce the cars efficiently.
Now, these stumbles caused a lot of people to doubt Tesla would succeed. I remember clearly all the FUD during the Model 3 ramp where people were looking pretty much daily at the chart of how many cars were going out and being like, see, he can't make 5,000 cars a week. They're destined to fail.
It's impossible to make an affordable EV. Literally, they were just like, you can't make EVs profitably. This is proof. Where are they now? Where are those people now? I would like to ask. But here's the funny thing. All of these little stumbles were just learning experiences for Elon. It was making Elon and Tesla much stronger companies because they were learning lessons not from reading a textbook. They were learning those lessons from hard, unpleasant mistakes that they then go like, wow, I know that. You know how like you can read about something and you're like, oh, that would suck if that happened to me. Or you could like burn yourself on something. You're like, oh, dang, I'm never going to do that again. Those are the lessons that Tesla was learning.
And what people forget is that Elon is an engineer first. And so as the CEO of the company, he was learning these mistakes firsthand and applying them to what he did next. And that's what most people discounted about Elon, that first of all, he does not give up. And he's willing to admit when he's wrong. He's willing to make mistakes. And he's able to pivot and learn from his mistakes. Now, this may sound easy, but many CEOs don't even ever admit that they've made mistakes, let alone learn from them.
And many CEOs are not even in the position to be able to make mistakes. They were put in that place to shut up, look pretty, say very uncomplicated things to the investors and to the public, and very politicized, like, oh, I will answer that question with another question, and not really helping anybody understand anything about their company because it's just to keep their nice, cushy job.
I would argue that many CEOs don't even understand their company. I mean, what Elon did was he lived on the factory floor and understood every single part of the process. He's done this at SpaceX, he's done this at Tesla, and so he knows firsthand what is wrong with the process and he can fix it. Whereas most CEOs are probably not even told what's wrong, because who wants to go tell the CEO there's a problem? All right, so what does lie ahead for Tesla? So to a lot of people, Tesla's stock price looks like Amazon's stock price looked back in 2016. Pricey. I mean, Tesla has a PE TTM ratio of 198x.
Okay, so I remember what the PE ratio is. What's TTM?
Trailing 12 months.
Okay.
It's kind of just averaging their price to earnings ratio over the 12 past months. And 198x, you're paying 198 times their earnings.
But remember that Amazon had a price to earnings ratio of 177 back in 2016.
So what if Tesla's stock price of about $775 a share today will look cheap 5 years from now? Because I want to mention this. So far, we've been talking about the fact that everything is looking rosy for Tesla if they just keep doing what they're doing with EVs.
With building out the gigafactories, their supercharger network, some of the planned EVs that they have that should be going into production, like Cybertruck and maybe the Model 2, the fabled Model 2. But so far, even just with the Model 3 and Y and building new gigafactories, it's a very nice looking projection.
But what did most people not think about with Amazon back in 2016? Most people were not pricing in AWS. Could AWS be Tesla bot?
People weren't pricing in Prime when they were talking about Amazon because, let's face it, it wasn't really anything back then. Is full self-driving equivalent to Prime?
Amazon bought Whole Foods, and now that's a big chunk of their revenue. Is Tesla Energy the equivalent of that, where people aren't even considering that that could be a thing?
Because when we're talking about AWS, Prime, and Whole Foods, everyone likes to sit around and go, of course, I knew that those things were important. Just look at where Amazon is today. So easy in hindsight to point to things and go, of course that is. But really, back in 2016, most people had no idea that these things were going to be as popular and as valuable as they are.
So I just want to talk for a second about our Now You Know Investor Club, which is part of our Patreon. We've got over, 1,600 members now? Mm-hmm. We've got a Slack channel where we talk about all this kind of disruptive investing all the time. And what I hear a lot from people is, darn, I missed the boat on Tesla. I see you guys talking about how you could have bought it back in the day for some low price, but it's $775 a share now. That boat has sailed.
And I think the problem is a hindsight view of the world just means that you're always going to be looking back and saying, oh, if only I had done this, if only I had done that. What is that leaving out? It's leaving out what you can do today.
And the good news here with this stock price is that you're buying into a company that no longer has to worry about going bankrupt. For the past few years, they've been walking on this tightrope between two mountains, and there's like 33% of the people being like, yeah, hope you fall, right? Exactly. Just waiting for them to stumble. Now they're in a much better position. They can make a few missteps if they want to and not worry about going bankrupt. So the stock price you're paying in for right now is a much more secure company.
And that's why the price is higher, let's face it. But that doesn't mean that the growth story is over. There's so many more things to be excited about when it comes to Tesla because, let's face it, they don't make that many different types of vehicles. I mean, the 3 and the Y and the S and the X cover a pretty big swath of, consumers, but we haven't even gotten into the pickup truck market yet. We haven't even gotten into the semi-truck market yet. We haven't even gotten into the affordable car market. Those 3 things alone are huge. And that's before we even start talking about full self-driving, which no one seems to understand. No one seems to be able to factor in. Full self-driving opens up so many more possibilities than we even really have time to talk about on this show. We talk about it a lot on our Investor Club, but there's just not enough time in the day to talk about all of it on this show right now.
And lastly, I just want to point out that as Tesla has now gone from, this little startup that could fail to this mega company, the media, I think, is going to start switching gears. This happened with Amazon, for instance. In the beginning, it was like, this little company selling things online. They don't talk about it that way anymore. So I think as the media shifts and they start talking about, like, of course, we've always been big fans of Tesla, you're going to see a lot of investors, both institutional and retail, going, oh, yeah, why don't I have Tesla in my portfolio? Mm-hmm. And as more and more of them add it to their portfolio, the price is going to go up. And lastly, I think we should take a little victory lap right now because we've been talking about how the shorts are wrong for years and it looked like we were wrong. right? I mean, it just kept coming back to, nope, there's going to be a problem with Tesla. They're going to go bankrupt. And we kept feeling like we had to defend the company against this just overwhelming FUD. Well, with 1% of the people now shorting the stock, that means they've all given up. They've all gone home. They've thrown the ball down on the ground. They've put their tail between their legs, and they're going home.
Losing an incredible amount of money in the process of doing so.
Yeah, because basically they've been squeezed. The squeeze is over. They lost. And I just think we should pat ourselves on the back, take a victory lap, and be like, all of us here that knew Tesla was doing the right thing, we have won. We've gotten through a big hurdle here where these people are going to have to go pick on some other stock right now. And Tesla is now in the clear in that department.
And what a positive thing that is, because what a positive thing Tesla is doing. By switching the world to renewable energy, we're going to hopefully be able to help curb climate change. And that is just something that's really important for everyone.
So thank you so much for watching this channel, for being part of the community, and for sticking with us when it looked like we were just two crazy dudes on YouTube. And it turns out that so far we've all been right. So thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week. Now you know.